I see it as so unnecessary, gratuitous, and counterproductive to what I thought the United States was dedicated to, which was trying to defend the security of this country, but also peace and stability around the globe. And I, as the congressman knows, who served, admirably in the military for many years, the Department of Defense really stands for something. And this sort of faux alpha male, strongman image and marketing that Donald Trump is involved in really just sends, I think, again, a wrong signal to the Department of War, particularly with things that have been going on recently. We don't want to, I think, send a signal to our friends and allies around the globe that we are committed to a very aggressive posture. We're going to be engaging in war. We are going to do everything possible to make sure we keep this country strong and safe and secure, and also work closely with our allies and partners around the world. But this marketing gimmick, and that's what it is, and that's what Donald Trump has been involved in for so many years, just these branding efforts to try to show that he is a strongman, it really, hopefully, is not going to do anything at all to the ethos, the real ethos of the Department of Defense, which is, again, to serve their country valiantly, nobly, and also fully consistent with U.S. laws.
Congressman, on the point about branding, he branded himself, Donald Trump, as the candidate of peace. He then branded himself as the president of peace. He also talked about waste, fraud, and abuse. It would cost billions of dollars to change the name on the stationery and the emblems. I'm not sure that that's Americans' #1 fiscal priority. And then you have Pete Hegseth saying this. Take a listen.
At your direction, Mr. President, the War Department is going to fight decisively, not endless conflicts. It's going to fight to win, not to lose. We're going to go on offense, not just on defense. Maximum lethality, not tepid legality. Violent effect, not politically correct.
I didn't know he had more rhymes than Ari Melber, but apparently he does. I mean, what message does that send to our allies and to our enemies?
Well, first of all, look at the message to the American people. We just had an atrocious jobs report that comes out within the last 24 hours, and the president spending his time giving the Secretary of Defense a new nickname, and that's all that this is. But let's take it, we can take it seriously for a moment. Okay, now it's the Department of War, and they have service members deployed in cities throughout the United States of America. So who exactly are we at war with? But there's an underlying cultural and intellectual motivation behind this nickname change, and that is this belief that we have not had a respectable military since World War II. This is so disrespectful to every living veteran who they very clearly now think are actually suckers and losers who haven't been winners. I got to tell you, I've spent close to 20 years in various forms in the military, active, National Guard, Reserve. Never spent a day in the military where I felt like I was amongst losers or amongst an institution that was culturally degraded. That's how I felt that America's culture at times was a bit off, but not the military's. These are people that come together each and every day and put the mission first. And it's not only a waste of time and a waste of potential resources, as you point to, but it is also just so disrespectful to the institution.
To say the least, the congressman is correct. Let me just say that they are just being so. One thing you got to appreciate about Donald Trump, I guess, if there's anything I can appreciate about the president, is that he is wildly consistent. He is very consistently telling us what he believes, what he's going to do. His people are telling us quite loudly, and I believe that they are doing these things out in public quite loudly. They're not trying to hide them because they don't believe anybody is going to check them. They do not believe they actually have to be accountable to anyone, and that feeling that I have, Director Brennan, is underscored by headline today. Trump is sending 10 stealth fighter planes to Puerto Rico.
Thank you very much, everybody. So we're going to now cover the G20, and I'm going to let these people go back to the Department of War and figure out how to maintain peace. Okay? Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Congratulations, General. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Great job.
Sir, just before
You have been listening to the President of the United States. He's there in the Oval Office signing an executive order for changing the name of the Defense Department to the Department of War, a change that dates back to 1949. This was definitely a war posture that the United States was in at that time. Donald Trump saying that right now, in his words, it is a matter of attitude. and that it sends a message of strength to the world in changing that name. A lot of other things happened in that press conference. I want to bring in Ron Brownstein, who's our senior political analyst, and he joins me now. I do want to get first to this name change or the rebranding.
Yeah.
Ron, I ask you, what do you think most Americans would think of this name change, and obviously military families first and foremost?
Yeah, look, I mean, anybody who's walked past a building that, the Trump organization is involved with knows that Donald Trump likes to put his stamp on things, often 2 stories high. But I do think there is a larger message, as you were saying, and it is something like militant unilateralism, militant isolationism, his view that, we are not going to be as involved in allies, but we are going to often unilaterally use force in ways that he thinks advances the national interest. It does convey the kind of belligerence that he applies to pretty much, all other nations around the world, whether traditional allies or adversaries. So, it is revealing of his mindset. Whether families will, consider it appropriate. It's kind of, he's even said it's meant to convey an offensive vision of military force as opposed to a defensive vision of protecting the homeland. And it may be that protecting the homeland construct that I think is more comfortable for families in the military.
It also goes to World War II veterans, certainly, that I've had the privilege to interview over the years. I can't remember any that understand that there's an appropriateness, a time and a place that the country is at war, but have always defended their bravery on the basis that they were, as you said, protecting the homeland and trying to prevent war. Right. In terms of actual material things that relate to the Defense Department, he really dodged questions on 2 issues. I do want to get first, though, to the issue of that boat in international waters, the Venezuelan boat that, many legal scholars have said that this is, and pardon the pun, uncharted waters from the United States, because it is extrajudicial killing, right? There is no due process. No one knows, no one is, or at least it hasn't been disclosed, what was on that boat, who was on it, and that it sets a dangerous precedent. You heard the president there doubling down, saying they will do it again.
Yeah, and that's what I was, kind of saying in the first answer, which is that this actually is reflective of his view of the world, which is not necessarily one that involves working with allies in traditional ways, but does involve a view that the traditional constraints on the unilateral use of American power, whether it's bombing Iran or bombing this boat, or potentially even taking action in Mexico.
Of the Defense Department to the Department of War.
That was the name when we won World War I, we won World War II, we won everything, and just to me seems like just a much more appropriate. The other is defense is too defensive. And we want to be defensive, but we want to be offensive, too, if we have to be. So it just sounded to me better.
The Department of War was first established by George Washington when he founded the U.S. Army. The name was later changed in 1949 as part of a... I think he's sort of alluding to it. Like, people are laughing, usually when there's a shared thought. But the thesis is peace through strength, right? This was always how the Trump administration sold their vision for strength in the world.
It is, and I mean, we know he cares deeply about branding, and as he said, he wants to come off as more offensive and more strong and mightier, but I think it also draws attention to the fact that this president campaigned promising to end or decrease America's involvement in a number of global conflicts, and just bringing people's attention to the word war, I think, will bring their attention to the fact that he hasn't actually done that, and some things have, in fact, gotten worse in terms of America's involvement in wars.
The thing that I'll also say is that his biggest deployments have been in American cities, and so, the war on whom exactly is the question I guess I would ask.
It was a big topic at the National Conservatism Conference this week. Not the name change, but this issue that Eugene talks about, and the fact that this president is different than past Republicans in that he does want to be seen as the peace president. And I mean, that is clear from the first 6 months in office. I think it's why you have a move afoot on Capitol Hill with Senator Mike Lee and Congressman Greg Steube to put this in legislation and make this name change official. Obviously, it's one of those things that I think that this president wants to make sure that that he leaves his mark.
Yeah.
And this is one way that he's going to try to do it.
I mean, it's one of those things where it's like nothing says give me a Nobel Peace Prize like my new Department of War. Like, it feels like I'm hearing mixed messages.
Perhaps, but I think at the same time that deterrence that you talked about in terms of his peace through strength doctrine is what he's going for. We don't want to enter into war, but maybe it is the deterrent, that the message it'll send to those adversaries in the world, whether it be Russia or China, that want to provoke a war, that may have them think twice.
But one could argue that this is a sign of weakness and not a sign of strength. I mean, if you need to carry a big sign saying we are the Department of War and we will mess you up, is that really kind of showing strength? I mean, we've had a long period in the United States since the end of World War II where there has been pretty much peace, stability and prosperity. And so I don't know that the name changes exactly might be signaling the thing that, that he wants to be signaling. However, at the end of the day, war, defense, it's still soldiers, boots on the ground. It does what it does.
Okay, so stay with me. We've got more.
Donald's rebrand is already a disaster for him. But I'm going to be honest. While it's getting a lot of pushback, and I understand why, from military types and other general, like, people who serve in the federal government in a, like, defensive capacity for the United States. So military, but also, like, you know, CIA, FBI types, you know that. It's actually a good thing. What Trump is doing here, and he doesn't mean it, is rip the mask off American military imperialism. Because countries do this now. The United States isn't the only one, of course, but all the countries now call their war-making powers departments of defense. In Canada, we have the Secretary of Defense. Israel calls it the Israeli Defense Forces, even though really it's the Israeli Offense Forces. Let's be clear about that. And likewise, the United States, at least for a long time now, has called it the Department of Defense and the Secretary of Defense, right? But in many ways, there hasn't, when's the last time the United States has had to actually defend its own territory, right? Like with arms, most of the work being done is them waging offense on other countries. And so by putting it this way, you get rid of this like doublespeak, this Orwellian 1984, you know, words just are changed to mean the opposite, right? You know, it's not a Department of War, it's a Department of Defense, where in essence, you're doing the thing that a schoolyard bully does, where you say, stop hitting yourself, you know, stop hitting yourself, right? And so this is actually a good thing. Because it's, from our perspective, it's pissing everybody off that might be open to Donald Trump because it's making them look bad. It's also just a process of needless stupidity. But it's also giving us all an opportunity to explain to people that a blind support for war is not patriotic. And that the military, while having defensive capabilities, is not primarily a force of defense, but a force of American capitalist imperialism designed to empower the rich and wealthy and well-connected, and that's the main goal. And now the Department of War, it's way easier to paint that with that brush than the Department of Defense.